I guess we are online.
Yes, I think we are online, yeah.
We are online, so welcome everyone, and thank you for being here at the third event of the GrowBot Festival. I am here with Thomas Peck, professor at the University of Freiburg and director of the Freiburg Botanical Garden, and Nicola Tirelli, coordinator of Polymers and Biomaterials IIT Lab. So today we are going to talk about plant behavior and adhesion abilities. And my first question and curiosity is, what is adhesion ability?
Okay, if I start from the botanical point of view, one has to say is that adhesion is part of attachment. Plants often attach to other plants, especially climbing plants, where we are very much interested in. And they can do it, for example, I have here an example. This is a twiner, and this twiner attaches by twining and friction. And adhesion is a special type of attachment, which is physically very well defined. And adhesion, you, for example, find, I also have one here. These are adhesive pads, tiny adhesive pads from a parthenocyssus. And here really physical adhesion takes place, often with interlocking structurally, but also often with chemistry. And I think Nicola, as a chemist, can tell much more on adhesion either I can.
Well, yes and no, in the sense that in reality, when chemists talk about adhesion, chemists like me tend to put together a lot of different concepts just to be sure that they don't miss any. But in reality, we often don't know what we are talking about. So there are a number of phenomena that are present often in the same adhesion process and combine to provide an overall high adhesion, high gluing strength. But the question is that very seldom A is a single physicochemical mechanism, so van der Waals forces are invoked virtually in any form of adhesion, but not only. You know, it's often a complex phenomenon that uses van der Waals forces, hydrodynamic capillary forces, mechanical interlocking, ionic interactions, and so on. But most importantly, we have to take into account that both in the animal and in the plant world, we seldom have just a large surface that sticks to another large surface. And the topology, so the way the surfaces are organized, is very important. We often talk about hierarchical organization because if we go to the plant level, leaf, cell, patch of a cell, and so on, we observe a lot of details that matter terribly to make things extremely sophisticated and flexible. Because plants and animals don't like to be glued forever, like with a very strong glue. They like actually the glue to be acting when it is necessary. But when it is no longer necessary, an animal, but also a plant, doesn't need and doesn't want to stay there.
Thank you. So let's understand, why do they have this ability actually?
For plants, and also for some animals, it's very important. Especially, we concentrate on climbing plants. Climbing plants are evolutionary very clever because they invest relatively little in their stems, and nevertheless, by attaching to host trees, host structures, some also climb on rocks, they can go up to the light and have a little invest. And for that, they have to really secure their attachment. And coming back to what Nicola said, adhesion is sometimes really a very complicated physical chemical system. I can show you in a video. So Paula, would you please share my video, my screen? I can show you how good adhesion can be.
Yes, I guess she's...
We start again. Is it on?
Not yet, almost. Okay.
Here you see 3 adhesive pads with tendrils. The tendrils are spiralized. It's from a parthenocyssus, the Virginia creeper. And you see a lot of movement can be taken and dissipated. I run it again just by, more or less extending the tendril. And the adhesive parts are only, as Nicola said, these tiny pad-like structures here, which on one side really physically interact with the surface by growing into the tiniest surface irregularities, and in addition have a glue. And what's interesting, normally never the adhesion part fail, but the tendril fails. And that's, I think, thank you, Paula, we can leave it with the sharing now. That's very important because climbing plants, they nearly need a safe attachment. Some plants, like for example, Gallium aparine, they don't even have a permanent attachment. They attach in a bit of a Velcro-like way, so this can easily detach. And that's really interesting. If you have attachment and detachment, then it's normally only mechanical interaction. But as soon as you have a longer lasting attachment, a permanent one, then chemistry comes in. And this is what Nicola and I'm very much interested in, how to do it with a very clever chemistry, with a little amount of material, and how to really secure this kind of attachment.
Okay, so how do they have this ability? How do they actually stay attached?
I would like actually to complement what Thomas was saying in terms of the reason why plants may climb, and I'm not sure whether my screen can be shared, and I mean, can you see it?
Almost.
Yes, okay.
Almost.
So now it's you. And this guy over here is, I suppose, an Italian-American guy that does gardening and has its own way to remove ivy plants.
Especially if it gets quite old.
I will silence him, but the key important point that you can see is that, whatever operation is done to remove ivy plants, remove the branches, but not the attachment point. And this guy has its own method for removing the ivy plant, which is essentially fire. And he burns them completely, and even burning everything still leaves, and you will see it at the end of this movie, some residual things that needs to be brushed away. I mean, skin can be now returned to the original. Now, so the first thing that I would say is that hello. The first thing that I would say, therefore, is that plants can climb sometimes to be simply annoying and annoy the gardeners. And but most importantly, in relation to what Thomas was saying, this is a classical example of a failure of the climbing plant that is not adhesive, still adhesive to a wall, it's cohesive. So basically, the adhesion force is so strong that the rest of the plant is detached, but the adhesion point still is there. Now, for what pertains to how, this depends on the plant. But, every living being essentially has its own technique, or sometimes techniques, to adhere. And some of them are quite standard. Some of them are very specific to the species. And the funny thing is that some chemistries are very well preserved throughout the living beings, and on and off are used for adhesion. One thing that is often encountered is that there are some chemicals that are under the name of catechol, and one of them is probably most famous as a neurotransmitter, dopamine. Now, these catechols are fantastic glues, And the most classical example is that offered by the mussels, you know, the gasteropods, the shellfish, that adhere through a dopamine-containing protein virtually on every substrate. And they are not the only.
Perhaps if I may in plants, it's interesting that proteins they contain.
I guess there is a little problem about that.
Do we have problems with my microphone?
Not
You're
now.
okay.
Okay.
Now you're perfect.
Because in plants nitrogen is very few in plants available. Except for plants normally or rarely use proteins. They more often use sugars, polysaccharides, because polysaccharides, this is what the plant has easy to use because it's part of the photosynthesis. Sugars are made by photosynthesis, and therefore Nicola is totally right. In mussels, it's really this fantastic dopamine-based stuff. In plants, it's often sugars. And this is an example, as Nicola said, that different animals, different plants use different glues, and they normally produce a type of glue which is cheap for them. And that's a thing we can also learn, I think, from nature. You always use what you have a lot of and what is cheap and easy for you to make.
But I should add that the very chemistry that, for example, mussels use for adhering, so catechol oxidative polymerization, is used by most plants with raw materials coming from polysaccharides and not proteins, make lignin, which is not an adhesion, or at least not directly an adhesion factor, but a structural factor that cross-links cellulose fiber. So we have a very similar chemistry used for different purposes. And Thomas can probably comment better than me in terms of the mechanism of adhesion of ivy, and which has been debated for quite a long while.
Yeah, ivy is a real nice plant, as Nicola shown in his movie. It's one of those things you remove the twigs and the leaves easy, but what's remaining then, it's the roots and the root hairs. And we have looked many years ago into the system. The system is absolutely clever in ivy. Ivy roots grow on the surface and they get information about small irregularities on the surface. And then the root hairs, these are single cells, several hundred of microns long. They grow into these irregularities. Then they dry out, which is a normal process in the life cycle of ivy. And by growing out, they spiralize and shorten and pull the ivy plant closer to the surface and makes this absolutely fantastic attachment system. And again, it's a combination between mechanical interlocking and glue, which is secreted by tiny, tiny bubbles on the ivy root hairs, only if the root hairs get contact to these irregularities. And it's one of the systems I find most intriguing in the way how clever it is, how adaptive it is, and how good it works. And these are things Nicola and I and the other colleagues from GrowBot are very much interested in, to transfer it to technical systems, to soft new technical systems. For example, for our GrowBots, we need attachment systems. They have to attach to unknown environments, and there's these attachment systems are one clue to solve the problem and to bring our plant-inspired robots really in a real application.
In fact, my last question for both of you was exactly how important it is and why it is so important to imitate this ability, to transfer this ability to soft robotics. Nicola and Thomas, I would like you both to reply.
Okay, so I start perhaps. Our idea in GrowBot is to use information about plant growth to make a totally new generation of robots, of soft robots. At the first moment, it sounds a bit mad because they say, oh, a robot, he has to move, he has to do something, but plants are static. And this is totally wrong. Plants just move in different time scales from the ones we know. If you have a time-lapse movie from a rainforest, there is a lot of action in. And this is what we try to transfer. We try to understand first how the plant orients itself in a strange, complicated 4D environment over time. Then how the plant, if it has found something to attach to, attaches itself. Which type of attachment structures are used? Are they permanent? Are they reversible? And then we try to find the best solutions for a new type of plant-inspired robot, which can more or less, much faster than a growing plant, orient, attach, and move in a very complex environment by itself. And this is a combination we as biophysicists, biologists, do together with the engineers and chemists. And for Nicola, we need to understand the chemistry.
Absolutely. There is, however, another important point, which is we need to be very clever in the engineering.
Absolutely.
In the sense that once we have a chemistry, we need to have it at the right place and at the right moment. Mm-hmm. So we have, therefore, an issue of transportation and control.
Yeah.
And these are not trivial things, because, you know, in a system that is controlled by central intelligence, like, you know, I'm saying too much myself. Thomas is more intelligent than me. So, but you know, the brain decides, or the heart, you know, pushes things there. But if we want really plant-inspired robot, it has to have a peripheral intelligence. So it has to somehow be able to understand, depending on the environment, you know, when to do something and when not. When to transform something that is circulating into a glue. When to expel it, you know, extrude it, and so on. And when to keep it, on the contrary, contained in a nanocapsule until it is needed. So these are the challenges that go beyond, sometimes beyond our knowledge nowadays. And sorry.
No, I totally agree. I think this thing with the centralized intelligence, for us, normally robots have a brain, some kind of calculator. And this is a big difference. Plants don't have a centralized brain, but plants interact, as Nicola said, incredibly clever, incredibly adaptive with the environment. And our idea is to smart up our materials we are developing with our colleagues, because you have to see, a plant grows, it doesn't know where, it doesn't know when, it has to react what's acting on it, and those stimulus reaction processes are delocalized exactly in the places where the contact is happening. And this is a big challenge on the one side for chemists, for material scientists, for our engineers. But I think it's also a great chance to avoid, for example, long-lasting decision-making. Because what we never see is it takes time. And also in humans, a lot of our daily decision-making doesn't run over our brain. If I would have to walk a stairs and would have to think on each step what to do, I would just topple down. It would not work. So a lot is extra brainal decision-making. And in plants, it's so to say, driven to the extreme. Everything is localized in the material system which interacts. And this is, I think, what Nicola said, making this happening in technical materials, in plant-inspired technical materials. This is a big challenge, but also a big option for us for the future.
Great. So if you want to add anything else, or if there is any questions, I will check, but I don't see any specific question for the public until the video will be available for next week. So if there are any questions, I will send them to you. And I want to thank you both for being here. And I want to invite you and all the other people to follow GrowBot Festival, because on Monday there will be another event. So thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you very much, Nicola, for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Have a nice day, you all.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.